Hello, 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 every one of the two people who are watching right now. How's everybody doing? I hope everybody had a good day. Um, I decided to do this kind of impromptu live because somebody sent me a video. Uh, Actually, it was audio. It was audio only of somebody saying some nasty things about me, saying some nasty things about yours truly. And the question is, why would somebody want to say something nasty about me? I'm a generally nice guy. I don't go around picking fights with people. So it's just interesting that ever so often I get uh, some video or some audio or some picture, some screenshot of somebody saying something negative about me. So I decided to share it with you all and to do a live response to it. I listened to most of it, not all of it, but going to be sharing it with you guys tonight. Broski Bear, hey, how are you doing, my friend? Says, what up, Chato? I'm smoking a cigar now too. Well, cheers. Um, just calming the nerves a little bit. Give me 1 second. Of course you can. Sorry about that. So, so apparently, some guys went live on Instagram, and somehow or another, my name came up. Um, and they were passing it around saying some negative things about me, which I don't care. You know what I mean? I didn't lose any sleep once I got the recording. I slept perfectly fine that night. Um, in fact, I was actually laughing the whole time while listening to it, and so hopefully, we can have a couple of laughs tonight. Why not? Got the cigar going, got a little tequila, so let's get into it. Let's see, what cigar are you smoking? Actually, this was a gift. Somebody gave it to me, so I'm not sure what kind of cigar I'm smoking. It's really good though. It's a really good cigar. Okay, so let's get on right. Let's get right on into it. Um, let's drag this and drop it right there. That's actually pretty funny. There's a picture of a raccoon, and it says roasting Chad. I'm wondering if the person who sent this to me made this graphic, or if it was made by the individuals who was doing the roasting. So let's see how well they roasted me. Am I? Did they? So when they roasted me, I wonder if I'm well done, if I'm cooked all the way to the middle, or if it's medium rare. I wonder if they maybe just kind of burn the top, and then I'm not really cooked all the way through. We'll see, right? Um, let's see how this roasting went. If you guys can't hear, just put in the comment section that you can't hear, and I'll see what I can do to fix that. The audio, I believe, is a little rough in the beginning, but I think it clears up maybe right around minute two. This is a 10 minutes of roasting. Have you ever been roasted for 10 minutes? Those of you who are watching right now, have you ever been roasted for 10 minutes? Have and what gets me is the fact that grown men have the ability and the time to sit on a IG live and talk negatively about somebody for 10 minutes straight. Now you'll never see me cuz what I just said might sound a bit hypocritical because I'm live right now, but the thing is, anytime you see me go live or anytime you see me make a video, you'll never see me roasting people more so than picking apart and dissecting ideas, right? Because I'm more interested in an idea and the validity or detrimental effect of said idea than I am in roasting somebody just for the sake of roasting somebody, right? So anyway, let's see what these folks have to say.
They had trouble selling the first
You
Uncle
don't hear
Tom,
that?
and so now I don't know how they did financing on it. But and I'm
Put a yes in the comments if you can hear it.
talking about the finance of it because the financing of it
Well,
because it's all about a grift.
He talking just like he them.
Chad's another big time sellout. Y'all said that he's in the new in the Coon documentary, and he said that they run it, right?
Chad said Mark Connor, J. Edgar Hoover, George Wallace. He talking just like he them. Come on, Bill.
Good Lord, man.
He said Barry Goldwater is one of his favorite.
I ain't met a nigga alive that like Barry Goldwater except for Chad. Man, come on.
okay, so all right, thank you guys for responding in the comment section. You said yes, you can hear. So I don't know if you guys heard the very first part of the recording, but they were making fun of me because I had some nice things to say about Barry Goldwater. And I do. I stand by those nice comments about Barry Goldwater. I double down on those nice comments about Barry Goldwater. And the reason for that is because the historian run narrative that exists about Barry Goldwater today is that he was a racist, that he hated black people, and this, that, and the third. That's the narrative that's spun. You probably learned that narrative in your school, that he was against the civil rights movement. And he was against the civil rights movement. But do you ever stop to ask the question why? Why was he against the Civil Rights Act of 1964? The reason he was against it is because it was unconstitutional. Was he a racist? Absolutely not. Every piece of civil rights legislation that came before the Senate prior to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Barry Goldwater was for. Why? Because he was able to weigh the constitutionality of said bill, of whatever law that they were trying to pass at that given time. But there was something unique about the Civil Rights Act of 1964, namely that it infringed upon the rights of private owned companies or private, entrepreneurs, small business owners. It was unconstitutional law. Here I am, a black man, admitting as much. And there were other black people admitting as much. Reverend J.H. Jackson, I reference him all the time. He was against the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Even Malcolm X, a man who I disagree with on a whole slew of things, disagreed with the Civil Rights Act of 1964 on the basis of its unconstitutionality. But what you have to understand about Marxists and the way that they operate is if they want to destroy or neutralize is the better word. To neutralize someone is to disarm them, to make them less of a threat or not a threat at all. That's what it means to neutralize somebody, right? The way that Marxists neutralize you is by defaming you, is by turning you into a kind of leper in the eyes of the public, where you're untouchable, where you're tainted, where the sound of your very name makes people want to distance themselves from you. That's what it means to neutralize somebody politically. And so the way that they do that is by stamping some kind of taboo word to you: racist, bigot, homophobe, white supremacist, this, that, and the other, right? And so think about all the people that you grew up believing were racist, sexist, bigots, so on and so forth. Think about all those people. I dare you to go back and look at these people and listen to the things that they said and weigh and determine for yourself whether or not these people were genuinely racist, and some were, or whether these people were saying things that were true, but they were a threat to the Marxists, and so the Marxists made it their duty to defame them. When it comes to Barry Goldwater, he lands in the latter category, right? I'm not saying that literally everybody the left tried to defame or the Marxists tried to defame didn't deserve it. Some of them did, but many of them did not. And so, yes, I said positive things about Barry Goldwater, and I stand by those things. He said something that is the truest thing that I've ever heard an American senator say, ever. And that is that we must not continually and perpetually be alarmed by chaos that the left says that, that we must be alarmed by. But rather, it is incumbent upon us as senators to go slow, to really investigate said chaos, to determine whether, first of all, whether or not it is genuinely a chaos, and second of all, whether or not there is any legislation that needs to be passed in the first place, and if not, what can be done in the private sector to address that issue. But you know, to do that requires too much critical thinking. To do that requires too much common sense. It's better to just get everybody over emotional and over sensationalized and pass legislation that in the end is only going to expand the government's power all the more, which is exactly what we got with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. We granted the government the power to dictate the do's and don'ts of small business owners. It was bad law. It was constitutionally bad law. Now, does that mean that states should have the right to enforce segregation on private-owned businesses? No, that is equally unconstitutional. Both are extremes and unconstitutional. But again, that's too complex of a conversation for most people to have, and so they'd rather just kind of just be satisfied with the rhetoric and the narrative that's passed by or that's pushed in our media and in our public schools. But listening to the first part of this recording, how Chad is a coon because he said positive things about Barry Goldwater. The fact that these men who are doing this little live are so triggered, right, that they're willing to spend 10 minutes talking bad about me, goes to show that the propaganda and the narrative to get black people to believe that conservatives are racist is actually working. That's all that shows. I mean, the guys who said what they said about me, I mean, they're not enlightened. They don't have some kind of knowledge that the rest of us don't have. All they're doing is being cheerleaders for the kind of run-of-the-mill propaganda that all of us get if we grow up under the public school system. I'm not surprised. I'm not impressed by the fact that you're just echoing things that you heard in your public school. Like, that's not impressive to me. I still have some of the textbooks from the public schools I went to in the attic in my home. I can pull those things out and show you exactly what these guys are saying verbatim at the age of 33, 34, 35 years old, and take it back to what they learned in their textbooks when they were in middle school. They haven't advanced their knowledge. They haven't broadened their horizons. They're echoing the same things that they've been told, the same propaganda they've been told. And here I am, somebody who dug deeper, who went beyond the surface, who dared to see for myself and to open up the veil and find out, well, a lot of what we taught or were taught was propaganda. Since I dared to do that, here you have these fools who are coming along and saying, oh, how dare you challenge our idols? How dare you challenge our heroes and praise the people who we've been told all of our lives are our enemies? You see how this thing works? Wonder if I can.
Come on.
Where y'all find these dudes at, man?
Chad ought to be ashamed of his
Barry
damn
Goldwater
self.
was one of the prominent figures in history.
He's from an area that's like 80% white. So
It sounds like it. We know.
he doesn't have anything dealing with black culture. He was isolated from us. He didn't go to an all black school or dealt with a whole bunch of blacks. You know, and then that's why he calls it.
Why didn't that documentary?
Okay, so you'll notice that they said, oh, Chad, he went to school with 80% white people. He didn't grow up around black people. He was isolated from us. Like, the reason that's comical to me is because if you're someone in my position, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If you're somebody in my position, according to these individuals, according to these pro-black, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud, Black Lives Matter, blackity black, everything's black. According to them, someone in my position is damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. If I went to a school full of black people and I came out a conservative, according to them, I'm an Uncle Tom bootlicker sellout, whatever, because I am rebelling against my people. I grew up around blacks and I decided to turn my back on them and become a conservative and assimilate into the larger American society. And as such, I've sold out my people. I ought to be ashamed of myself. I'm no longer invited to the cookout, right? According to them. On the other hand, and let me add to that, not only have I sold out, but I embraced white people who are supposed to be racist, right? I embrace white people who are supposed to hate us so much, which leads me to the damned if you don't side of the equation. Since I'm somebody who went to school predominantly around white people, and I don't have any stories of how I was mistreated, how they didn't like me, how I wasn't welcome, how I was spat on, how I was called a nigger, this, that, and the other. Because I don't have those stories, the fact that I was so isolated from black folks means that I can't understand or comprehend the plight of the black man. Well, if I went to school around white folks, shouldn't I be the first person to have some kind of story as to how I was treated so badly and how I was racially profiled, this, that, and the other? And so if I should be an example to you as to why and how America isn't as racist as you're told it is by the mainstream media and, you know, a lot of these rappers and you know, celebrities and artists and so on, and politicians, you should be able to take my word for it. By your own admission, you are saying that, oh, Chad, you grew up around white people. So shouldn't my word count insofar that America isn't as racist as you think it is? Make it make sense. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. The conclusion of it all is that these are individuals who want so badly to be victims. And to the extent that someone like me comes along and say, you're not a victim, oh, now I'm the enemy, right? It's almost as if, you know, you're behind bars and you're imprisoned and the gate's wide open. You can walk out. You've been exonerated. You're free to go. And I come along and tell you, look, you're free to go. The door's open. Walk out. And from behind the bars, you start berating me and shaking your fist at me. And how dare you? And you don't know my plight and you don't know my situation and you don't know this and you didn't grow up around us and blah, 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 whatever. You start berating me when all I'm trying to tell you to do is, look, you can come out. I mean, you're free. You can do it. I believe in you. Oh, but I'm the enemy. Some people just can't be helped. All right, so
Didn't have any Uncle Tom
Anything dealing with black culture. He was isolated from us. He didn't go to an all black school or dealt with a whole bunch of blacks. You know, and then that's why he calls it.
Why didn't that documentary didn't have any Uncle Tom too? Didn't have no black historians part of that project? It's a white producer, it's white investors, it's white donors.
Yeah.
okay, so he's talking about Uncle Tom too, and he's saying, why didn't they have any black historians? Why didn't they have any black intellectuals? Well, first of all, we did. I'm a researcher. Dr. Vodi Bakum is a researcher. Carol Swain is a researcher. Dr. Ben Carson is a genius. You did have black people who are intellectuals and researchers in the film. So what are you talking about, first and foremost? And second of all, when it comes to most of your so-called black intellectuals, your Cornel Wests of the world, your Hank Rogers, who go by the name of Ibram X. Kendi, when you have folks like them who are crawling in the so-called black intelligentsia, most of them are tainted. Most of them, well, I was about to say something, but that would have been rude, so I'm not going to say that. But look at who's signing these people's paychecks, for one. Look at the kind of policies they support for the other. The policies they promote, the ideas and the agenda that they promote and that they're trying to sell the masses of black people in this country are detrimental to black people and are detrimental to America at large. I'm not saying that because I'm theorizing. I'm saying that because it's true. Because we have a century of case study to prove that is true. Carter G. Woodson was talking about these people a long time ago in 1933, I believe. I quoted this before for those of you who follow me on IG. I forget what he said verbatim, but he said something to the effect of Negro intellectuals are going to schools at Harvard, Yale, University of Chicago, and others, and they're learning from their Marxist professors, says Carter G. Woodson, that the things that the Negroes are doing in the South in the way of entrepreneurship can't be done. And then he concludes by saying this: the uneducated Negroes in the South are doing what the miseducated Negroes in the North are being taught can't be done. Now that's profound. Why don't you see that quote floating around IG in memes and such? Because people don't know it exists. But you can know it exists. All you have to do is pick up the book. It's called The Miseducation of the Negro, written in 1933 by Carter G. Woodson, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. I don't agree with everything in that book. I don't agree with all of his assessments, but I think that one is spot on. And so when you ask me the question, why don't you have more black intellectuals? You mean like Cornel West, who sold out? And by sold out, I mean sold out to the kind of Marxist globalist types, the globalist elitist types. He sold out to them. You mean like Hank Rogers? You mean like Ta-Nehisi Coates? You mean like Nicole Hannah-Jones of the 1619 Project? Is that who you mean? You mean like Henry Louis Gates, who is owned by PBS? Like, they literally own him. And he's constantly putting out these propaganda films trying to solidify this victimhood status of black people in America. That's who Henry Louis Gates is. Why would I put these people in the film? The only way I would put them in the film is if they repent and they admit that everything that they've been selling and peddling heretofore in the past has been a lie. That's the only way that they can make it in Uncle Tom 2, because in Uncle Tom 2 and 3 and whatever else we put out, we're all about the truth. We're not about some kind of leftist agenda. Think about it. If you watch our film, yes, we do mention Republican and Democrat in part 1, but for those of you who've watched Uncle Tom 2, I dare you to go back and watch it and listen for the words Republican and Democrat. You won't find it once. You won't find it one time. Why is that? I'm glad you asked. The reason you won't find it is because we're not trying to sell the Republican Party to our audience. We're not trying to demonize the Democrat Party to our audience. We're simply telling you what happened, the facts of what happened historically with regard to Marxist infiltration. The moral of the story and our message of Uncle Tom 2 is to worship God, not man. I don't care if that man is Martin Luther King. I don't care if that man is A. Philip Randolph. I don't care who that man is. Worship God, not man. That is our overall message. We're not trying to sell some political party or political agenda or political ideology. We're simply telling you that the black community was at its best and brightest when it was Christ-centric, when most black families were going to church and being the church. But to the extent that the Christian faith in the black community was subverted by the social gospel, and who was at the head of that? None other than Martin Luther King, right? He sounded good. He looked good on camera. He spoke in a very poetic way. But as I said in my last live, he was the reverend that officiated the wedding between the DNC and the black vote. And we haven't recovered since. That is a marriage that has been connected ever since. Sure, black marriage rates have declined since the 1960s, but one marriage that has stayed intact is a marriage between the DNC and the black vote. And I made the joke, what Martin Luther King brought together, let no man, especially no black conservative, separate. Think about it. So no, we don't have these black intellectuals in our film because we don't want to taint the film. We're not trying to sell you some political agenda. We're observing and acknowledging the fact, once again, that Black America was at its best and brightest when it was Christ-centered, when most black families were in the church. And to the extent that the church was co-opted and we learned to celebrate celebrityism as we moved into the 1970s with the emergence of blaxploitation films and all the like, we replaced what used to be the role models in our community, namely the pastors, the fathers, the entrepreneurs. Those people still exist. They haven't gone away, but the light isn't shown on them to the same degree that it's now shown on the lowest common denominator of our so-called community, the rappers, the hustlers, the gangbangers. Now, if you ask the average person who is name a successful black person in America, they're going to name someone like Jay-Z, or name whatever rapper, fill in the blank. But my point is, somebody who brags on the radio about selling drugs or having sold drugs in their past. And so we removed our men, our real men. We put them over there as the outcasts, as the sellouts and Uncle Toms. And in their place, we put the drug dealers and the hustlers. And so that's what our young men now aspire to be. And when it comes to your so-called black intellectuals, many of them justify the lofty place of the hustler in the black community. They justify it. They don't challenge it. They're not advocating that we begin once more to get back to the patriarchy, that we get back to a place where we are encouraging entrepreneurship, not in the name of blackness, but in the name of just decency. The say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud era crippled Black America. It didn't help. Thomas Sowell said it best, to the extent that people begin to assimilate to the larger society, much like the blacks were doing from the early to mid 20th century, much like the Hispanics were doing, like the Asians were doing, like the Irish were doing, like the Polish were doing. To the extent that people are coming over to the United States, they recognized the glory of the United States and they were assimilating to the overall values of the United States. It wasn't until the 1970s when you had these so-called black intellectuals insisting on getting back to our African roots and all this other nonsense. You had the popularization of the so-called black name, right? That happened around the 1970s, where a lot of blacks started, naming their children these odd names. And now today they're complaining, oh, my kid can't get a job because the white man doesn't like the fact that their name is LaShonda. Look, I don't have a problem with the person's name. I'm just observing a known fact. Not known by many, but it is known, and to the extent that it's documented, that around the 70s, when you had this insistence on so-called blackness by whose terms, right? We don't stop to ask those questions. It's not like it's cosmic, like it's this cosmic truth that this is what blackness is. No, it's not. There's no cosmic truth of what blackness is. It's this construct that's given to us, that's brought to us by the God-hating intellectual types who are trying to imprint their version of what black identity is in hopes that people will go along with it. And sadly, many have. But not all. Most black people I know are doing quite well for themselves and carry themselves and conduct themselves with decency. But we all are victim to this notion of this idea of what blackness is, where we don't initially think of folks like myself and other black men who are doing quite well for themselves. And you don't necessarily have to be rich. You just have to be a man who's responsible, who takes care of your family, much like any other ethnic group. But sadly, when people think of black culture, they don't think of that. They think of the hood element. This is due to propaganda that we've been sold and have bought into since the 1970s. Anyway, I'm going to continue on with this roast. Apparently, I'm being roasted right now. How do you guys think I'm doing, by the way? Do you think this roast is going pretty well? Am I being cooked all the way to the middle? What's my internal temperature right now with this roast that I'm apparently getting right now?
Well, Mitch, no black intellectual is gonna step foot around them people, man.
No, they're not. They're not gonna waste their time. I mean, Chad is out here doing interviews everywhere, and the white director is there collecting the check.
Chad is out here doing the devil's work, passing it off as if they're doing this with God as the foundation.
Okay, so they said I'm out there doing the devil's work, right? Remember that verse in the Bible where it talks about calling evil good and good evil? I would venture to say that the men who are on this little podcast or IG Live or whatever it is that they're doing, I would venture to say that most of them are progressive, liberal, Democrat types, right? And so for me, as someone who was against that ideology and who advocates against that ideology and encourages people to repent and turn to God and to not be taken captive by the hollow and deceptive philosophies that these people are preaching, I'm doing the devil's work. Interesting. You guys are literally calling good evil, but I'm the one doing the devil's work. Make that make sense. I'm begging you to make that make sense. And then they talk about, oh, there's a white director behind Uncle Tom 2. Yeah, there is a white director. His name is Justin Malone. Very nice guy. Very pleasant guy. There's also a white investor. His name is Dan Tuttle. He's the son of I forget. I think his name's David Tuttle or something like that. He is the guy from the Orange County Choppers. Dan Tuttle is a steel manufacturer. Very nice guy, very humble guy, loves God, loves people. Now, the thing that brings Dan Tuttle, Justin Malone, Chad Jackson, and Larry Elder together to make a project like Uncle Tom 2 is what? A common love for God and country. That's what. Am I subordinate to Dan Tuttle or Justin Malone? No. In fact, they lean heavy on my research for the making of Uncle Tom 2. We all played an integral part in the production and the making of this film. I wasn't carrying out anyone's marching orders. I did a hell of a lot of reading, a hell of a lot of research, spent a lot of time in libraries and archives to understand this kind of vast, complex history of ours. And not only that, the cast members, folks like Daryl Harrison, folks like Virgil Walker, Vodi Bakum. We had a lot of people in this film who lent their voices. We didn't alter their voices. We didn't make it look that they were saying something that they weren't saying. These were some heavy hitters who contributed to the existence of this film. We weren't subject to some kind of white overlord. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, now that I've explained that, and I think I did a pretty good job, now let's talk about Mr. Ibram X. Kendi, the so-called author of the book How to Be an Anti-Racist. I have it on very good account that the majority of the ideas peddled in that book were that of a white Marxist. In the same way that the existence of your NAACP was started by a white Marxist named Mary White Ovington. They needed a black face to be the perceived head of the NAACP, and so they brought in W.E.B. Du Bois to make you think that it was his organization. But if you look at the founder of it, a white Marxist. If you look at the board members of the NAACP in its originality, mostly white Marxists. And so here you are trying to make fun of us or criticize us for the director of the film of Uncle Tom 2 being a white man. But you have nothing at all to say about the fact that Black Lives Matter, the grandfather of Black Lives Matter, is a white Marxist who claims to be a Jew. And by the way, if there's any Jewish conservatives watching this live right now, I encourage you to do more in terms of calling out these people. In terms of practical living, I say Judaism is a pretty decent faith. These people aren't representing your faith very well. And so you should be calling these people out, because you should be calling these people out in the same way that I'm willing to call out the so-called black intellectuals who I believe are representing not only black America very poorly, but America in general very poorly. Is all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Don't call me anti-Semitic. I'm not. I love Jewish people. I love all people. Let's keep it moving.
To telling the truth. The most
I
amount
like
of black people he done been around at one time is that Uncle Tom documentary when there was a bunch of Uncle Tom sitting at a damn round table.
I like when he said,
I'm going to play that back.
Chad is out here doing interviews everywhere, and the white director is there collecting the check.
Chad is out here doing the devil's work, passing it off as if they're doing this with God as the foundation behind it, telling the truth. The most
I
amount of
like
black people he done been around at one time is that Uncle Tom documentary when there was a bunch of Uncle Tom sitting at a damn round table.
I like when he said
That's just funny to me. I'm sorry. I think that's hilarious. That was actually a really good roundtable, by the way. I can't wait for you guys to see it. If you think that I'm bad, just wait till you see that roundtable discussion with myself, Colonel Alan West, Brandon Tatum, Jesse Lee Peterson. Who else was at the table? ABL. Just wait till you see that conversation. Nobody's seen it. It hasn't seen it hasn't seen the light of day yet. No eyes have seen it except for the people who were at the table. But first of all, it's not true. I mean, is that even worth saying that that's the only time I've been around a bunch of black people? Like, is that even worth addressing as a man who grew up in a black family? All my cousins are black. Well, most of them. But does it really matter? The amount of black people I've been around? Again, I take it back to what I said earlier. If you insist that America is a racist country, that white people hate black people, if you insist on that, and I'm a living example of someone who grew up around white people and didn't experience any racism, shouldn't you take my word for it? Shouldn't you say, oh, okay, well, maybe I was wrong? No. I would venture to say that by virtue of the fact that you're pointing out that I grew up around white people, by virtue of that fact, I would assume, with an educated guess, that you grew up around mostly black people. Okay. So you grew up in an echo chamber full of people complaining about the racism of white people that you didn't grow up around. I ask, what did this racism look like? What kind of racism were you subjected to? If your mayor was black, if your city council members were black, if a lot of the people on the police force were black, if the principal at your school was black, if everybody who is in an authoritative position in your anecdotal world are black, please tell me the kind of racism you experienced growing up and how white people were responsible for that racism that you received, that mistreatment that you received? How were white people responsible for it if everybody in your world growing up was black? How? Because I actually grew up around white people. I didn't grow up around only white people, as you assert. We were pretty mixed and diverse in the area I grew up in. But I didn't experience any real racism. The reason I say the word real is because, as teenagers do, we would always make fun of each other on the basis of a lot of things, including race. I dished it and I received it, but it was all love. And even if it wasn't love, it was just boys being boys. Now, in this delicate, kind of fragile world in which we're living now, that's unacceptable. And anything, whether it's, just soft, joking, play, you can be canceled for these days. And what I find to be the most pitiful and despicable is the fact that you have men, grown men in their 30s, complaining about somebody being racist. Give me a break.
The KKK was a Ponzi scheme. It wasn't really about
Ponzi
racism.
scheme, dog.
Unbelievable, man.
He said it
Um,
wasn't about racism. He said you can't find nobody part of the KKK lynching people like that. There's no correlation between the KKK and lynching, and that it was a Ponzi scheme. So tell me, what was the hustle?
now, how,
Great question. It was a Ponzi scheme. The KKK was a Ponzi scheme. You had politicians at the top who were part of the KKK, and they were charging dues. And so you had working white men, blue-collar white men, and lower white-collar white men who were paying dues to be a part of the fraternity known as a KKK because they thought that it would give them connections and that it would help them to elevate the ladder and to be, part of a brotherhood. And when many of them realized that the whole thing was a joke, they began to drop out of the KKK. This isn't something that I'm just pulling out of thin air. This is well documented. There was a Harvard professor, I forget his name. I'm going to put it in the description section of this video, so that you guys can go back and see exactly what I'm talking about. The study was conducted in, I think, 2009 or 19, I believe it was. It was a black professor at Harvard who's apolitical. In other words, he's not a Republican, he's not a Democrat, he's somebody, he's one of those rare people like a Thomas Sowell who He's one of those rare people like a Thomas Sowell who looks at the facts and goes along with the facts. And after careful study, long careful study, he was able to conclude that the KKK was a pyramid scheme of sorts. And when it comes to looking at objectively the correlation between lynchings and the existence of the KKK, when it was at its peak in terms of membership, there was no correlation there. Much of what you know about the KKK is narrative. Much of what you know about the KKK is narrative. It is. My question for you is, have you dared to look at all the facts? Have you dared to look at all the facts, or have you just been going along with a narrative that you've been taught? Now, am I saying that the KKK were somehow good? No, I'm not. It was a terrible, despicable organization. But you have to realize that to the extent that these movies come out and you have the KKK as a boogeyman, and you have all these things going on, the whole thing is to make you feel in your soul that there's somebody out to get you always, on account of your race, on account of your sexual preference, on account of your gender or what have you, and that you must always be afraid. And to the extent that you're always afraid, what that does is that creates this kind of leverage for politicians and for media journalists and demagogue types to constantly take advantage of your fears, so that they might use those fears in the voting booth to push political policy. It's all connected. It really is. And the reason I can say that for sure is because by my own research of like a lot of these politicians, like they advocate, like your Chuck Schumer types, who is pushing a lot of socialist policies from the Senate, right? He advocates, like, if you listen to him whenever he's on the campaign trail, whenever he's traveling, the various parts of where his constituents are and doing these town hall meetings, stuff like that, you'll notice that he's always advocating for education, right? He's advocating for a certain curriculum to be taught in public education. The reason he does that, if you ask, well, what's the connection between him advocating for certain curriculum being pushed in education and public schools and policy being pushed in the Senate? What's the correlation? What's the connection between the two? The connection is that he understands that to the extent that these children are growing up and graduating from these public schools, if they receive a certain sort of indoctrination, these are tomorrow's voters, and they will continue to solidify the existence and the necessity of these demagogue politicians, these leftist progressive type politicians who are continuing to push policy that's eroding the Constitution and eroding the West as we know it, eroding America as we know it. So that's the correlation between teaching certain things in our public schools and policy that's being passed in tomorrow's America, passed in tomorrow's America. And so that's the reason. And so part of that education, once again, is to constantly learn who the bigots are, who the fascists are, who the racists are. And the KKK is this kind of easy layup, right? These are individuals with hoods and ropes and things of that nature. Optically, they are a very scary force to a lot of people. And so long as you can continue to make a connection between the KKK and these other things, you can continue to solidify and justify and necessitate certain policy. What I'm saying sounds very, jumbled up, and I probably should have done a better job explaining it, but, it is what it is. I'm going to do an episode on that, by the way. That study from the Harvard professor, I want to do a study on the KKK, or an episode on the KKK, specifically with that study. I can go through it line by line, so that way it's not just my opinion, or you don't think it's just my opinion. I'm not going to say something that I haven't looked into myself. So anyway, I want to probably, what time is it? Well, I got to wrap this up. I want to wrap this up actually and come back to it. Where am I? Folks, this is a 10-minute video or audio recording that I'm listening to. And I'm only 2.5 minutes into it. So we got 7.5 minutes to go. But I got to get my son ready for martial arts. I got to take him there. And I'll come back and join with you guys maybe after or maybe tomorrow night, because this is a very interesting audio that I'm listening to. By the way, how am I doing in terms of being roasted? Right? I was promised that this would be a roasting of me. And most of what these guys saying is just absolutely foolish. Let's see here. Yeah. Roasting Chad is what that says. And you have a picture of a nice, healthy raccoon right there. I guess that raccoon is supposed to be me. But yeah, so, and man, I saw some comments over here that I would love to get to. But again, I got to get going. I will be more engaging with the comments on the next live. Again, I might be coming back live tonight, but then again, I might just postpone it to tomorrow night. Somebody said that I'm raw meat still. They're not doing a very good job roasting, are they? And I have to ask you guys because I want to know whether it's just my opinion or not. You turned the roast into a cold brew. Oh, Chuck is in here, man. I wish I had you on the live too. What's up, my friend? Hey, how are you? I'm actually leaving right now. So, guys, it's been real. Like I said, I might come back tonight. I might come back tomorrow. We'll see. But in the meantime, God bless and take it easy.